Hey, everybody. Great to see you this afternoon. I hope everybody's week is off to an amazing start. I wanted to welcome you to Holistiplan's webinar series, where we give you the tools to scale tax planning at your firm. My name is Laura Bolio, and I'm the VP of Marketing here at Holistiplan. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. If this is not your first time joining us, welcome back. We're super happy to have you. So as always, our number one goal is to bring you the maximum value and to bring your practice to the next level so that you can deliver even more value for your clients. Today, we have an incredibly special guest, Emily Rossum. Emily is an Investopedia Top 100 advisor, and she's a partner and senior financial planner at Archer Investment Management. You might remember Emily from the tax summit that we hosted back in April. It feels like forever ago, honestly. But she was the breakout star at our tax planning summit, and there was so much demand for Emily that we brought her back for a whole series to deliver even more value. Before we jump into it, the number one question we always get is, will this be recorded? And the answer is a resounding yes. We're recording it. We'll send it out in a follow-up email. If you have any questions, please drop them into the Q&A. We'll do our best to answer them as we go. And then if we have some that don't get answered, we'll put those into the recap email with answers. So please feel free to participate. We love your participation and we'd love to hear from you. With that, Emily, I would love to hand it off to you.
Yeah, thanks, Laura. So exciting to be back. Today we're going to talk about, I'm so excited about this new multi-year Roth Conversion tool through Holistiplan. If you were with me, I think last July, one of the presentations that I did, the biggest thing that I received feedback on was people were really excited about the way that in that particular presentation, I exported an Excel file from our financial planning software to show and quantify on this big, messy Excel spreadsheet for our clients their total lifetime taxes saved through tax strategy. And at the time, that was really the best way to do it, was export all their data and then kind of tally up on the Excel line how much they were paying in taxes each year in their plan, and then total it at the bottom, and then run the projection with all of the tax changes, and then total all of that at the bottom. And then on this Excel spreadsheet, show them the difference. And that was like the boom moment in that July presentation. But since then, Holistiplan has rolled out this new tool. So I want to spend a little bit of time talking about that today, talking about just tax planning in general. And really the biggest thing is, most of you that are on this presentation likely know the benefits of doing Roth conversions. You've likely talked about them with clients before. And I think what's new here with this tool is a better way to quantify the benefits of it. Because sometimes just simply saying, yeah, pay some more taxes now to pay less taxes later, when you're able to then walk a client through a scenario where you've plugged in their data, and then you show them this big, crazy number at the end of total lifetime taxes saved and Medicare IRMA premiums saved, all of those different pieces, that makes that so much more powerful and drives people to action. So what I have found with different tools along the way is that a lot of times I talk to advisors that are incredibly knowledgeable about certain topics, but the ability to really sell the clients on an idea or be able to show them this idea and allow them to take action, so an actionable kind of plan, I think is really an important thing to have. So I'm going to jump into my slide deck here. I've got a few things to kind of set the stage here, and then I'm going to take you right into the tool. So Laura already kind of provided a little bit of information about me, the why I'm here. I'm an advisor. That's what I do all day long, every day, talk to clients about all different topics. We're a small firm out of Austin, Texas, fully virtual, but 230 families that we serve. I'm based in Charlotte, North Carolina. So our team, two advisors, my partner and I, and then we have a team behind us, about 5 people. So size-wise, I know many of you are kind of in a similar boat, maybe have much bigger practices or much smaller, but I do think that this is an important conversation with every single client. And a lot of what I like to talk about is how to scale tax planning, how to do this better for everyone. So that's something that I am passionate about. Today, we're going to talk about setting up your lab. So gathering all of the important information that you need in order to go into the tool and have an effective conversation in the tool, forming your hypotheses. So what do you think might happen? Do you think Roth conversions might work for this client? Is it a fit for their preferences, for their data? And then what do the tools say? So let's conduct that experiment. And then looking at that multi-year approach. So looking forward and ahead, kind of see what a longer term impact looks like. We want to analyze those results. So with these different types of tools, you have the ability to kind of plug and play a little bit. So what if I was more aggressive with Roth conversions? What if I did just a little bit over a longer period of time? What's the impact of that? And then adjusting. So how do we kind of think about this each year? We know that whenever we run long-term projections over decades, we already know on its face the information is wrong, right? We don't know exactly what tax rates are going to be or what our clients are going to earn, what they're going to spend. What we're really trying to figure out is, does this generally make sense? So does it make sense to have a Roth conversion strategy over a long period of time? And does it make sense to get started now or wait? And the other thing, kind of the final thing for any of you that are advisors too, we want to keep our clients for a long, long, long period of time. This is a huge, huge, huge way to show your value longer term. So I work with a lot of mid-career tech professionals. A lot of my clients are high income earners in their 40s, 50s, pre-retirement. A lot of them are. And so they've not often met that kind of early retirement kind of happy valley of lower taxes where they're kind of higher income earners. They've got maybe a dip in income when they go to retire, especially before they start RMDs, before they file for Social Security, when they've got some flexibility over where they're going to essentially draw down their expense needs. So when I'm talking to those clients, a lot of times I like to show them that longer range to say, hey, I've got a few ideas for your tax plan now. There's not a lot we can do when you guys are two high income earner W-2 wage employees, but I kind of want to show you something I'm really excited about. When you reach that age where you're going to start coasting down in income and coasting into retirement, there's a tool that is hugely impactful potentially in your case. And for a lot of my clients, a lot of them do want to retire comfortably in maybe their late 50s or a little bit earlier. And many of them who are super smart and hardworking don't necessarily want to just retire. And so for a lot of that, being able to show them, okay, you earn this amount now. So let's say you guys earn $400,000 now, but the two of you want to step back a little bit. Maybe you have a dip in income because one of you might step back from your career for a little while. Maybe you'll have a dip in income because one of you is going to consult or coast into retirement. And then you've got a period of time before you really have to start drawing out of your IRAs, or you can delay Social Security. So you can kind of control some of those variables. So again, this is an experiment. We don't know what the outcome of their lives is going to look like. But based on the variables that we input into tools like this, we can then calculate, here's a plan that I have for you longer term. Stick with me. So this is a long-term plan we're going to work on together. And so that's a lot of, as you're working with clients over a long period of time, we don't want to build a financial plan and set it and let them go and let them kind of run their plan. In a lot of cases, we really want to provide a huge amount of value now, today, and we want to be able to show them that we have strategy for you. And it's hugely important to work with a planner who specializes in tax planning and working with tools like these to help guide you through and navigate through this valley where your income drops over time, navigate through your tax picture in the long run, and have a huge, huge, huge impact. So one of my hypotheses is that for clients that are kind of willing to and kind of grasp onto this concept of Roth conversions in years when their income might dip a little bit or when they've got room in one of their brackets, they continuously do just a little bit of that along the way and then bigger chunks in other years. I believe that you're going to save them so much in taxes. That's going to make up for your entire fee and then some, then some, then some. Like beyond everything else that you potentially do that saves them money. That's why this is such a big, 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 big deal. So I think you probably already understand the benefits. You might have already talked to clients about them, but now we've got a new tool to play with. So when you're setting up the lab, I think it's important to think about our clients specifically and what their preferences are. So part of my onboarding with new clients, I try to understand a lot about their money history, a lot about what they need, what they're looking for, what their preferences are. And when it comes to taxes, I want to know what's happened in the past. So I gave you a few questions that I generally will ask. So have you ever been surprised by a large tax bill? How did that feel? What happened? So getting an idea of how they feel about that. If you feel that they're just so tax sensitive, then maybe this isn't a right fit for them. But if they feel open to potentially the idea of a little bit more pain now to save a lot of pain later, you might be able to gauge that a little bit more and identify clients that might be more receptive to concepts like Roth conversions over a long period of time. I also like to understand if they've done Roth conversions in the past or if they're even familiar with it. So getting an idea of if they have some Roth money sitting in a 401k, or if they already have a Roth IRA, I like to ask, how did this money get there? How did you make that decision? So how did you come to the decision so far to accumulate some Roth dollars? I try to gauge their understanding of what they know about their tax deferred, tax free, and taxable assets. So typically, as I'm onboarding a client, I just look at the total numbers to say, okay, you guys have $50,000 in what are considered tax-free buckets. So that's your Roths, that's your HSA, that's your 529 plans. These are all tax-free, and these will be, as distributed appropriately at the right times, this will be tax-free to you. And then this is tax deferred. This is what this means. These are what taxable assets are. This is how those work. So educating clients through the process, even clients that are really intelligent and typically have a good grasp of their finances, appreciate that type of conversation and understanding their preferences and how they play into the picture. And how do you and your partner, so if applicable, how do you differ in your feelings around taxes? I have one client in particular I can think of where they were married later in life. So this is a second marriage for both of them. And he's like, no, taxes are part of life. I don't mind paying taxes. So in his taxable account, we're a little bit more aggressive about rebalancing and kind of getting him kind of into tolerance with the investment model. With her taxable account, we're a lot more sensitive because she, like physically, you can see her when we talk about taxes. She hates paying taxes. She is not receptive to the idea of rebalancing, even if it means lowering risk or doing things we want to do with the portfolio. She's not receptive to the idea of Roth conversions. We've talked about that a little bit with her. So even though they filed together, this is something that I do kind of talk to them a little bit differently about. And we kind of manage their tax preferences a little bit to each person individually. So that's something important to know looking into the future. So I like to know about their kind of legacy plan. So I ask the question, would you rather pay taxes in your lifetime and leave tax-free money to your beneficiaries? Or would you rather leave assets to your beneficiaries and have them pay taxes kind of during their lifetime? So getting an idea of how they want that to potentially look. For a lot of clients that even if it is kind of on the fence on whether or not Roth conversions make sense, sometimes this is a point that's really important to them. So I'm working with a client right now who she's doing pretty aggressive conversions right now because she loves the idea of having this big old bucket of tax-free money going to her kids when she goes. So there are plenty of cases where that might kind of drive your decision making and how aggressive you go with the projections. None of us know the answer to this next one of what exactly tax rates are going to look like in the future. I just exchanged an email this morning related to interest rates with a lender that I know. I was helping a client get a construction loan. And so I emailed him and I said, I really hate to ask this question. I'm like, what do you think about rates this year, interest rates? And he said, I'll only reply if you tell me what the S&P 500 is going to be doing in the next 3 months. So we don't know. But I like to get an idea of what the client is thinking. So what are their thoughts about taxes? So we all consume different media. We all think differently about what might potentially happen. And you might be surprised by the answers here. A lot of times, my clients who are big income earners and have been really good savers and have a huge amount of money built up, they just automatically think that they've been told, oh, my tax rates will be lower in retirement. My taxes will be lower in retirement. They are shocked when you run out a projection and show, well, maybe not, because if your expenses kind of stay the same and you're drawing money out of these tax deferred portfolios, your tax rates might be the same or higher at different points. So, especially when you get into the later RMD years, sometimes those taxes really kind of get away from you in those later scenarios. And most of them have never heard about the connection between healthcare costs and income. So I think that sometimes we have these ideas planted in our heads of, oh, I'm just going to only save in tax deferred vehicles, or I'm only going to, save pre-tax. I'm not going to worry about Roth because I'm a high income earner. My tax rate's just going to be lower later. So it's kind of interesting to kind of gather a little bit of information from your clients about what they think, what they've heard, what they know. Just like anything else in financial planning, our clients come in with biases and preferences. So it could be unconscious beliefs that are just running through their head, those money scripts. It could be just things that they've picked up on or heard based on what their coworkers are talking about at work, what their family talked about growing up. And maybe there's an avoidance there of paying some taxes now, even if it's for their own good. I also like to ask the question, what is your understanding about future cash flow and expenses in the future? So I actually got this from, we have a financial therapist that helps our practice, and I do some case consulting with her. And I recently asked her the question about just asking people about their expenses. It's one data point that very often I feel that people don't always give us the right answer, and whether or not it's because they don't know what their outflows are, what their expenses are. Maybe they just don't want to share, or maybe they are just telling me idealistically kind of what they should spend. Like, I should be able to go to the grocery store and spend X. I should spend that amount dining out each month instead of this is actually really what's happening. So what she had suggested is using the what is your understanding? So what is your understanding of your expenses right now? So how are you tracking that? How are you reviewing that? And asking them just in general, what's your understanding of what your expenses might be like in the future, what your big outflows might be like in the future. So getting a little bit of information about this, understanding what changes they might have in their income, in their expenses, other things that might be happening is also the data that we need in order to move forward with the multi-year Roth projection tool. So as far as gathering the data, we want to have ideally want to know what's their cash situation right now. So this is another preference question I ask when people are onboarding is getting an understanding of what a client's enough number is. So how much is enough to keep in your savings account or your checking account to just feel everything's going to be okay? How much feels like enough to have an emergency fund? We, of course, calculate those things. You know, there are guides out there about how many months worth of expenses you should keep in an emergency fund. But as you know from working with clients, everybody has a different feeling about how much is a lot. Just like if you were to ask anybody, like, how much is a lot of money to have in an IRA or a 401k? How much is a lot of money to have in a bank account? How much is a lot of money to find in your pocket after doing your laundry? And those numbers are different person by person and even by location of money. So it's good to kind of get an understanding of what a lot or enough means to your client and making sure that whatever we do that's going to potentially create higher taxes earlier on in their plan, we want to make sure they have the cash sources to cover that. So do they have good inflows, surplus money on an annual basis? Do they have money in a taxable brokerage account or in bank accounts? What are some other bigger expenditures that are coming up? So getting a good understanding of, they need $50,000 for this house project. They need to purchase a new vehicle. They've got a big vacation coming up. Maybe there's a dip in income for whatever reason. So occasionally clients that have more bonus or commission or RSU based income, potentially maybe a little bit of worry about that. So just making sure that whatever we are potentially doing, sure, maybe it actually looks great to do a $160,000 Roth conversion this year in the modeling, but if they don't have the cash to cover that tax bill, it's not a good idea, not a good plan. So understanding how they feel, understanding what their resources are, what their cash is in order to cover those taxes, and then potentially just putting all of that together in a tool. So what I would advise you to kind of gather together before going into the multi-year Roth projection tool is an understanding of their current income by source, by spouse, if there's both two people, and by year. So just generally kind of jotting out, okay, right now you earn X, how long are we going to earn that amount? When might that change? So for people who might coast into retirement, let's say they're 45 years old now, they want to work pretty hard till they're 60, and then from 60 to 65, maybe they want to take a step back, or up to whatever age. So you can kind of figure out what those stair steps might look like. It's helpful to kind of know that going into the tool. Future expenses and goals, and if those are going to change significantly. So if they have maybe some higher expenses now that are going to drop, that's something that you might want to be able to plug in. And then this is just kind of approximate tax budget. So this is a question that I ask, especially if somebody comes in with a lot of highly appreciated stock or taxable accounts with low cost basis. Generally speaking, how much are you comfortable paying in taxes, whether it's through trading or through Roth conversions? Is there kind of a number in mind that if you knew that your tax bill was higher than X, that they would all of a sudden not be receptive and open? Because as we know, with any recommendations that we're making, we want to make implementable recommendations. So we want to make recommendations that maybe aren't 100% perfect ideal. We want to give the recommendations that are doable, implementable, actionable. So those are some things to potentially have put together. So the different types of tools that I use, so through Holistiplan, I'm going to take you into the multi-year Roth conversion tool. And so that's really a kind of directional thing, right? So is this a good idea? Yes or no? What's the kind of long-term impact? Does this look great? The scenario analysis is really how I look at Roth projections still on an annual basis. So scenario analysis has been around for a long time. We've been using that to look at current year scenario and then being able to plug in that Roth conversion and the tax cost of that. So I still use that as well to kind of drill in and use the precision of the 1-year analysis. But the multi-year Roth conversion tool is really to kind of forecast out decades. So that's how I use those differently. And the last thing is, usually with the clients at this point, I've already gone through their tax report, but also just showing them and educating them on the different tax brackets and even showing them the Medicare IRMA brackets as well. So those are the different tools that I use in a Roth conversion conversation and our hypothesis here. So how do we optimize or lower lifetime tax liability by converting assets? So let's jump in. I think I have a question. I'll put my Q&A. How do you deal with clients who are already retired and have majority of assets in qualified accounts? So Colton, that's a great question. Of course, I work with a lot of clients that are mid-career, but I've been doing this for 18 years. I have clients that are deep into retirement. I have ones that are early into retirement. I work with some of my clients' parents, or I have clients that come to me at all different ages. And so I do have plenty of clients that are in retirement. And so it's just looking at and paying a little bit more attention to kind of those tripwires of those IRMA brackets. So sometimes we might kind of convert up to a certain kind of bracket. So converting up to kind of a no IRMA situation might be looking at that current year and saying, where do I want to kind of keep their AGI? So what potentially makes sense to kind of keep them in kind of a particular Medicare IRMA bracket? Or if they're kind of already over the line. I had a client last year in December. He said, well, good news, bad news. This mutual fund I've been holding on to forever paid out this big capital gain to me. So that kind of blew me over my that IRMA threshold. And so he's like, now I'm in the next threshold. So I'm like, great, let's do a Roth conversion to kind of fill up the top of it. So on a year by year basis, we kind of drill into the details of that particular year and say, where are you from a tax bracket perspective? Or if they're already in retirement, then we're thinking about IRMA brackets too. So that's actually the one I pay a little bit more attention to at that particular point, keeping them in a reasonable tax bracket and then looking at IRMA, because sometimes clients are pretty sensitive to that, and it's a real dollar cost that they're seeing on a monthly basis potentially. So what I would just do is even a small amount. I had a client last year who did a $7,000 Roth conversion, so relatively smaller amount. I had clients who did $200,000 Roth conversions, which in my head, so right, all of our heads, we have different kind of thought process. That feels like a big amount to me. So I've had clients kind of do all different sizes, but it's just kind of finding where they might be in that bracket and kind of trying to convert up to the top of it. And I would more focus in that case on that scenario analysis tool to give you that precise number for that year, but then roughly thinking about, well, if we keep doing this, so what's the benefit of continuing to do that? So even if it's that client like last year that did a $7,000 conversion, what if we kept doing $7,000 Roth conversions, or did 10,000, or blew into the next kind of IRMA bracket? So someone else asked me, are you using Holistiplan alongside another planning software, or exclusively this solution? So when it comes to looking at the precision of kind of looking at 1 year, always just Holistiplan. So I'm really looking at, I've uploaded their tax return, I've mapped it into the current year, and then I've taken a look at line by line what their situation looks like. Oh, let's see which tab I have it in. This is the only tool that has this level of precision and detail when it comes to taking a look at their return and then taking a look at kind of the tax cost of a Roth conversion and what bracket they sit in, should they do that. So what we're looking at here is then figuring out their AGI, kind of where they fit in, and then continuing to look down and then calculate their potential tax cost. So in this case too, I might convert a little bit more because they might potentially be able to afford that, or that might be within their tax budget. So that's particularly the tool that I'm going to use for that. With the Roth projection, the multi-year, I did typically do this within my kind of bigger financial planning tool that I use for all topics. But now that I have this type of output, this is what I'm using to talk to clients about multi-year Roth conversions, because the output of it, again, is just a better looking tool. I can't wait to take you into this, because this is a better way to talk clients through the story. So it's setting the stage for, directionally, does this make sense? Do we want to do Roth conversions over time? And I keep clicking on the wrong one. In the scenario analysis, what's the cost to you? What's your AGI this year if we do this? So we're typically then looking at the scenario analysis to do it. The reason I had their tax report pulled up is because in part of the conversation, it's kind of, again, visually nice to be able to show a client like, hey, you guys have a lot of room to go in this 12% bracket, and they jump pretty quickly. So I don't know if anyone on here knows why the IRS has brackets that are 12 and then 22 and then 24 and then all the way to 32. So the way that they jump is pretty dramatic. So potentially we want to keep somebody, maybe in this case, in the 12% bracket, if they're lower income earners or have low income years, or if they're in the 22 or 24, saying we don't really want to jump you up into the 32. So just seeing what you're solving for, sometimes clients need to see this. So that's really what I think the Holistiplan tools do best, is to be able to give you a tool to be able to walk a client through that and help them understand it differently than they've ever seen it before. So same thing with long-term capital gains brackets and Medicare premiums. So these Medicare premium thresholds, this is also something that clients often just don't know about. And I talk to clients who are in their 30s, 40s, 50s about IRMA, because I have had clients come to me who are 67 years old, who all of a sudden got a letter in the mail and they said, why am I paying this extra amount for Medicare? No one's ever told me about this. So it's never too early to talk about this with your clients. So this is really from a tool output perspective. This is really where I spend my time with clients, and I take them into Holistiplan. So originally when I started working with Holistiplan, it's just something I ran in the background to help my team better understand a client's taxes. Now all my clients are familiar with Holistiplan. I pull it up in our meetings. We walk through, in our meetings a scenario analysis during the tax planning meeting so we can validate and check all of the numbers together. I can explain to them what I'm thinking as I'm walking through it. So instead of just saying to them, oh, this year potentially it might make sense to do a $25,000 Roth conversion, I can show that to them live. So this is really exclusively the tool that I use to do that. And then we put the results into my financial planning software to kind of then incorporate everything else together. Somebody asked what I use for retirement income planning. I'm a Right Capital user. So Right Capital is what I would consider our main tool, but Holistiplan really is our main tax planning tool that we use right alongside it. Okay, I'm going to jump over into the Roth projection tool, but I'm going to take you into the household first to show you where do you find it. So if you ever want to know where do I find that tool for Holistiplan, you always just go into the household. So as you're logged in, you go into your households, go into all households, find your client or add your client. You've got some basic information about your client in here, and then any previous year's tax returns or reports or letters that you've created for them so far. We're going to go all the way down to this new tool here. So Roth projections tool, we're going to go into that. I'm actually going to create a new one so you can kind of see what the beginning one is. Sample today. Filing status is joint. We're going to pick our client for each one. So it's going to grab their date of birth. So that's all the information that we need to kind of start the scenario here. So once they're in here, we're going to just view projection to continue to edit and go into the tool. So all of the information is going to be along this kind of control panel here on the left-hand side. This is where you're going to enter a bunch of data about your client. So I'm going to take you through just adding a little bit of data here about this client. So nothing new to add here. This is what popped up in the window previously, is selecting which client we're talking about here. We need to know a little bit of information about their assets. So how I do this, so I mentioned I work with Right Capital, typically have that all already saved and aggregated there. So I've got that on my other screen and I'm just pulling in some information. So taxable assets, in this case, they've got 300,000. I'm also including, so just for your knowledge, I include their taxable brokerage accounts, and if they have an emergency fund or excess savings, I'm including that number as well, because this amount is available to pay taxes potentially. So any kind of excess cash, I guess I should say. So cost basis on that. So let's just say some of it is basis, some of it is gain. That'll get calculated in here too. Tax deferred assets. So now I'm going to total up for the first person. So in this case, it's Austin. So Austin, how much does he have in tax deferred assets or IRAs and 401ks all combined? You want to add up all of his 401ks, all of his IRAs, throw in a number here for him. Okay. And for client 2, so that is his spouse in this case, we're going to put in her balance. And how much do they have in Roth assets right now? 50,000. Okay. So in here, then we're going to decide if we're going to do some Roth conversions for each of them. So I'm going to go in, client 1 is again Austin. So here's where I go in. And if any of you were on the Roth conversion presentation that Roger Pine did, I think it was a few weeks ago, there's actually already one new enhancement. So that's what I actually love about Holistiplan, is I'm constantly seeing these enhancements. So before, if you watched that presentation, you could just plug in the year. Now you can plug in their age. So that's another option for adding different rows. That's something that's even new from that presentation. So we're going to add a row. What we want to do is start with what year do we want to start doing conversions. So in this case, he's 45 years old. So we're going to start now. Annual amount. So I'm going to just plug in, because in this case, if I've gathered all my data and gathered all the information, what I know about them is for the next 8 years, she plans to stay home with their family and then re-enter the workforce. So I happen to know in my fictitious scenario here that they have a little bit of an income dip before it goes up again, and then it goes down again in retirement. So I want to potentially capitalize on that. So I want to plug in maybe doing some Roth conversions while she's not working. And inflation is really how much more will you do each year? You can choose whatever you want to plug in here. Okay. Add a row. And it's not letting me. Okay, let me apply that first. Okay. So what it starts to show you is, I'll add a row in a moment here. It'll start to show you if you did $20,000 a year, just every year from this point forward, you have to still tell it when to stop. So it's going to tell you while he's living, you're going to do a conversion each year, kind of moving forward. We're going to add a row. So if I wanted to just do it for a few years and stop, I could just basically plug in at his age, let's say 53, that we don't do anymore. And apply that. We can say, okay, there's conversions for a period of time and then that stops. Or you might be able to say, okay, we don't want to do any between age 53 and then his kind of coast age or early retirement age of 60. But at that point, we want to pick it back up because he's going to work still a little bit between ages 60 and 65 in my base case scenario here. So now I want to plug that in and say, okay, so now we then pick up some conversions again, but maybe we want to stop those or change the amount. So at 65, for example, when he's done working all together, so we don't have employment income, maybe we want to turn up the heat a little bit on this too, do a little bit more. So right now we're kind of we're going to be plugging in some ideas and then we're going to take a look and kind of test, see what that looks like, and then go back in and kind of edit the variables a little bit. So I'm going to show you how we do that. Might do that again, and then maybe we stop again at 70 because they're both filing for Social Security and they've got other income, and maybe they're ready to be done doing those. Okay. So you can start to play with this idea of, okay, so in this case here for them, maybe we'll do some Roth conversions. Maybe we'll stop when his wife's back to work for a few years. Then when he's kind of working a little bit less and then really done working, we're going to potentially look at doing some Roth conversions for him. So let's play with that kind of hypothesis here. Okay, so we have Roth conversions built for him. So we know we created one for him because there's a check mark here. And then we're going to potentially look at her. So potentially she might want to do some conversions as well, but let's just say that she wants to just wait and do them more at that retirement age. And she might decide to stop working at 65. And she just wants to do a little bit of conversion. Oops. Oh, year, age, 65. All right. Now we're going to add in, so we don't want to do them forever in her case. Maybe we just want to do that until 75, required minimum distribution age. And at that point, we want to stop. So at that age, we want to go to 0 and apply. So we've got some conversions built in for her as well. So then we go down here, we want to add in some additional information. So you're just going to kind of work your way down. You can make some changes in here about some of the assumptions that you might want to make. So your tax adjustment assumption, there's a little bit of a guide here about what that means. But essentially, when you're comparing a balance at any point in time, we know that Roth money is not the same as pre-tax money. So if you have $1 million of Roth, it's not the same as $1 million of pre-tax money, right? Because you have this embedded future taxes owed on that tax deferred bucket, on that IRA. So we know that they're not equivalent. If you were to kind of cash everything out and put your money in your hands, you're not going to have the same amount. So what this is saying is basically what that terminal tax rate might be, or that tax rate might be on the money at distribution. You want to have more of a tax adjusted kind of ending result to be able to provide a comparison here. You can change what you feel about rate of return on their assets. Maybe they're a little bit more conservative. And then some of the other assumptions that you want to make, such as the tax rate sunset or not. You can change that. You can go into spending here and start to plug in some of the different spending assumptions that you want to make. So starting now, they've got some outflows. Let's say they spend $100,000 per year. And their inflation is about 3%. You've got their expenses, straight line. But you can go in here, and if you know all different types of years that they might have a spending drop, so let's say their kids leave the house in 2040, for example, maybe that drops down to 80,000. or they're paying off their mortgage. So if you have a future kind of mortgage gets paid off or expenses drop for whatever reason, something along those lines, you can adjust the spend number too. So that also affects that scenario. So you can go in there and play with that. So we do want to go in and turn on the potential Medicare premiums. So in this case, they're retiring early enough where I think they're going to file for Medicare age 65 in this case. I'm going to go in here, add in some Medicare ages. Life expectancy, I'm going to just drop that number a little bit, guys. Sorry. Kill you off a little sooner. And then we need to add their wages. So we need inflows and outflows to properly run this scenario. So we're going to go in here and just add in some income. So client one, again, that's him, that's Austin. We're going to say 2025. We're going to say that he makes $120,000 a year. Gets raises every year along the way. And we did say he wanted to retire a little bit earlier or kind of step down. So let's say he steps down in income. And then he's ready to be done when he's 65. So you can plug in, I mean, there's a whole bunch of rows you can add here about income assumptions and changes. You can add different spike years. So if you know that there's a particular year that they're going to have a big inflow or RSU vest, something like that, you can go ahead and change and add multiple years that have different income levels. So now at 65 goes to 0 because he is done. He's officially going to step back from work. So you can always see kind of what's happening here. So this kind of helps you check your assumptions here. Okay, this makes sense. He's working now at his current job. He's going to step down and then he's going to be done. So that's kind of a quick way to visually see what you've plugged in. And if you're doing this with clients or you've kind of pre-built it a little bit, you can validate that with them in here as well to say, are you good with this assumption? Because if the clients are comfortable with the inputs that you're giving, with the assumptions that you're using, typically they're going to trust the output a little bit better as well. We're just going to plug in Social Security income here. And we'll do the same thing for her. So we'll go into her scenario, go to 95 with her too. All right, so wages. So we know that she decided to stay home with her kiddos for a few years here. So we're going to have 0 income for a period of time. But she's going to re-enter the workforce. Let's make a decision on that. 53. How does that sound? Annual amount. Maybe it's part-time. And then from that, she's going to be ready to be done at 65. And at that point, her employment income goes to 0. So if you have other income sources, so for clients, if you serve clients that have pensions or other income sources, you can enter those in too. So if you have an annuity start date or pension amount, you can potentially do that too. I'm going to give her some Social Security. Okay. And we'll apply that one. So no Social Security income, it picks up at 70 and continues to potentially climb here. So again, you can kind of go in and adjust all of these different areas. All right, let me take you to the good stuff here. So these are the different types of reports that come out of those scenarios. So you can go back and forth. So if you're talking to a client about, well, what if this scenario, what if that scenario, you can go and say, what if I make a little bit less of that kind of part-time job when I re-enter the workforce? Or what if I stop a little bit sooner? You can plug and play and kind of go back and forth and it'll immediately update the scenario. So the big thing here, this is what I used to do on the bottom of an Excel spreadsheet, is really calculating what is the difference in your total lifetime taxes. And so in the base, so if they just kind of continued on their merry way, deferring tax, putting money in tax deferred accounts, not doing any Roth conversions, spending those accounts down as needed, they're going to be predicted to pay $6.8 million in taxes over the remainder of their life. By doing Roth conversions just in this scenario that we just randomly plugged in together, is directionally, does it make sense to look at Roth conversions? Oh yeah, it does. Look at this big tax savings number here too. And I even have to prepare clients sometimes too to say, I'm going to show you a number that looks kind of crazy. It's kind of a big number. But this is really kind of in future dollars in the future, what you could be potentially paying in taxes in your lifetime. So as good savers, as good income earners, you've got a big tax bill kind of in your future and a really big opportunity to adjust that. So you're able to then look at here, taxes paid by year. So this is what it's essentially showing is each year where this really picks up benefit is later on. So in the base case, they had all of these big RMDs with all of these large taxes. So you're able to kind of show them the taxes paid by year compared base case of no conversions versus a case where you're doing the Roth conversions. And then IRMA surcharges, I love that they added this tool in here too. I feel that this is also something that's really important to show clients too, is what they're potentially paying in additional Medicare costs. So here, on a year-by-year basis, they're going to start paying IRMA surcharges earlier and be in the next brackets later. What I would potentially do as part of that kind of test and monitor and control is say, how do we maybe even knock this out too? So how do we potentially, is there a way to do some conversions that might save them this amount in IRMA surcharges as well? So we know that if we do nothing and their income continues to climb and they have higher income later from all of these RMDs that are coming, they're going to pay $354,000 in additional Medicare premiums beyond what everyone else does. That's a meaningful number for a lot of people. And I'll tell you, people don't like to pay it. So in this case, what I might do is kind of go back in and say, if I maybe am a little more aggressive on Roth conversions earlier, can I get this guy down to 0? That would be kind of my next test or experiment that I might play with. But either way, just by plugging in our quick scenario here, we know that we're saving them a good amount in the future. And then portfolio value here. So again, we're looking at the tax adjusted ending portfolio, the base case here. So they're kind of portfolio balance at 98 years old, base case is 19.8, Roth conversion is 22.6. If you were running out in a kind of income scenario or balance scenario, it might show that base case might be a little bit higher ending balance during that time, but you still have that embedded tax liability. So it's important to kind of look at it from that tax adjusted perspective. And then the portfolio value difference. So how much more will they have? Boom, a lot more in their account. And a lot of that benefit happens later. The final thing that I wanted to show you in here is the RMDs. So as you are educating clients about future RMDs, being able to show them what their RMDs would be. So even if they feel that, oh, my income is going to be a lot lower in retirement or later on, you can show them, well, when you're 87 years old, you're going to have to be pulling, $533,000 out of your IRAs. By doing Roth conversions and lowering that kind of year-end IRA balance, it could be $348,000. So when you're kind of going through here, you can then go back in and say, well, what if I was a little bit more aggressive about this? So what I like to do here is just look at that projection difference and say, okay, so far we've saved them $2.457 million in taxes. But what if we did a little bit more? So what if we kind of bumped up these conversions? What if we did a little bit even when they're both working? What if we did just a little bit more in each of these cases here, did 55,000? Apply. So now it's going to show you we're just kind of doing a little bit more in each of those cases. Can I make a bigger impact? Big difference. So you can go in there and kind of plug and play with some different ideas to say, what am I solving for? So if I want to solve for continuing to lower their taxes, that's important to look for. So you can look at it like creating just a single year scenario and just seeing what 1 year's difference does to the overall projection. So you can say, okay, what if I do one this year? What's the overall trajectory of my taxes, overall trajectory of my assets? You can kind of start there and then add additional years. But really the power of it in convincing clients to do it is ultimately, if it's in their best interest, of course, is to be able to show them, hey, by paying a little bit more in taxes along the way each year, by doing these conversions more strategically, there's a big, 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 big difference to how much you're going to be paying in those total taxes in your lifetime. And so I had some questions in here. So somebody said in here, I have trouble convincing clients to pay the taxes outside of the conversion when they have plenty of cash versus paying for out of the conversion. How do you address that? So it really depends, right? So are they over age 59 and a half? So do they have access to funds? They want to use their IRA funds. You can potentially project that. Ultimately, what you then want to do is to make sure that if you're going to be taking money out of the IRA to pay those taxes, you want to kind of include that in the bracketing, right? So if you have $50,000 of room up to kind of that top of the bracket or top of the IRMA surcharge, and they want to pay the taxes out of their IRA as well, you want to then do a smaller conversion, right? So that the total doesn't go over. So sometimes it's just a little bit trickier to calculate. But maybe they want to do that because paying taxes out of the IRA doesn't have that same time waiting throughout the year. So maybe they don't want to pay estimated quarterly taxes or estimated tax payments. Maybe they'd rather just have it come out of the IRA. That you can absolutely model that. But what I like to tell clients is if we're going to make the most impact, potentially doing the full conversion amount that we can, get as much into the Roth that we can, and using some of that cash. So if we've already understood them, understood their goals, understood how much is enough to have in cash, and you've got all of that already understood, then you're basically saying this is surplus money. And if we use this here to pay some taxes, then it's going to accelerate our experiment here. It's going to be an accelerant. It's going to allow us to convert more, and showing them in a tool like this, okay, instead of converting $40,000, now we can convert $50,000 because we don't have to pay the tax during the transaction. So I would just show them that experiment and show them that way. But at the end of the day, that is an option that they could take if they're over that age 59 and a half and potentially not subject to that penalty. So next question, does the program allow for modeling with different sources to pay taxes for the conversion? Not really. At this point, no. But as I already looked in here, there's already been enhancements. So I would suggest if you have a really good idea for an enhancement to send that over to the Holistiplan team. If you'd like to see what's actually happening, if you are a big time data nerd and you want to see the Excel spreadsheet, there's an export button. You will be amazed with how much data comes into that export, and you'll be able to see exactly what the assumptions are and where it's coming from. But again, you know, it will bundle together whatever you put into that taxable bucket. So if you decide to put in that excess cash that they have at the bank in addition to their taxable account, it's going to potentially spend it down out of that or cash flow. So if they're working and have good income, so if they're making $150,000 a year and their expenses are $100,000 a year, they can also cash flow those taxes too. So there's a couple of assumptions that are made in here as well. In addition to IRMA, do you have any pause about doing conversions if the clients are on ACA health insurance and potentially owing back premium credits? So yes, you want to pay attention to if they're on ACA and they've already reported a certain income amount for that year or expected income for that year, you want to potentially work with them on that. They might have to, or it might make sense for them to pay more for their healthcare to do some conversions to get this bigger, longer term result. I did have a client, though, I'm thinking of in particular, who that was the one thing she really, really cared about was low cost health insurance that allowed her to retire and have the safety and comfort to do so. So she retired at 61 years old. She had ACA. She kept her income really low and she was so happy about it. And then we started Roth conversions when she was 65 up to the Medicare surcharge IRMA bracket. So that's the other thing about knowing your client. Sometimes I will tell clients it's worth it to pay more for healthcare now to save all of these taxes later. And sometimes it's also helpful for a client to kind of think about their lives too, to say, if I have surplus money now, if I have money in a taxable account or a savings account, or I have surplus income now, I'd rather kind of cover these tax liabilities now. So think about it too, like some of your clients that might love to pay down debt or pay off debt, to be able to kind of say like, this is kind of like future money owed, it's kind of like a liability. If you want to think about it like debt, do you want to kind of just pay your debts earlier? And so sometimes it's worth it to maybe think about how they think about money, think about how they want to frame it, and kind of see what that might look like. I had another question. How do you confirm client year-end magi and coordinate with the CPA to execute with precision? Great question. This also leads into, I had a question in here too about when do I do this? So I do my tax planning meetings with my clients in September, October, November timeframe. And usually we kind of know what to expect for the year, right? So I've uploaded their tax return. I've already got a scenario analysis built for a lot of my clients. We've been doing this for a couple of years. They're already in here. So if I have their scenario in here, so as soon as I have a 2024 tax return, that baby's going up in here, and then we're going to be able to start playing with the 2025 scenario. But to your point, how do we know where they're going to end up at year end? That really just takes looking at, well, how is their employment income going to change? Are they going to have more interest or dividends than they did in the previous year, or IRA distributions? Maybe they have an inherited IRA. So what's their RMD going to be? Or if they're RMD age, what's the RMD? Looking at each of these different areas and seeing what might be different. When I am working together with a CPA, I'm typically then sending that over to them and saying, hey, we ran a scenario analysis for them in Holistiplan. Do you see anything that I should adjust in this scenario before we make a decision? But I also, if we're really trying to stay within a bracket, especially like an IRMA bracket, because if you go over $1, it's a cliff. You're going to have that additional cost. So I like to just kind of stay below that in case there's any unknown capital gains that come into their taxable accounts, any additional interest, dividends, anything like that, or they have to sell an investment. I just want to make sure that I'm staying below that. So I tend to do these Roth conversions at the end of the year. Sometimes for clients that we know we're going to keep doing this each year, I've got it on my radar. I've got a tag for them in Holistiplan. I have a tag for them in my CRM system. And I typically have an open task. Like I've got all these reminders that these are Roth conversion clients. They like to do these. They're on a strategy to do it multi-year. And just taking a look at that so that if the market drops a lot, there's a few things I'm looking at for clients that are just have different ideas or plans, like, oh, we want to get them out of a big stock, or we want to do a Roth conversion. All right, now I've got a whole bunch of tasks that I can go in and say, okay, now might be a good time to do that. So that's really kind of the deviation from doing it at the end of the year. Okay, so I know there's a ton more questions, and just like always, I love to look at those questions after the end and answer those for you. And then Holistiplan sends out the recording, my slides, and my answers to questions that went unanswered. So rest assured, I will get some responses out to you on those as well.
Thank you so much, Emily. This was such a detailed, super deep dive presentation. It was really awesome to see the Roth projection tool come to life. It was super informative, and we had some great engagement from our viewers. So just want to say a huge thank you to Emily. I dropped her next webinar in the chat. So if you loved what Emily did today, please come back. I think it's on March 5th. So March 5th at 2 p.m. Join us there. The registration is right in the chat. And if you're interested in Holistiplan, the best way to get started is to either book a demo through our website or start a free 7-day trial. Roth conversions are the #1 reason that people come to us. Tax planning and then Roth conversions is right up there. It's one of the most frequently asked questions So if you're thinking about getting started, highly encourage you to get started. And then I think we have a promo code, right, Emily?
Yeah. So my name, so Emily Rassam, and then the number 10, 10. So Emily Rassam 10. So just try it. That's what a lot of people kind of worry about, learning everything about a tool. Go into it with a client and say, hey, this is new for me, but I want to walk you through it. I'd love to get your feedback live. So I would just suggest get in there and start doing it, and you will learn a lot as you do.
All right. Awesome. And then we'll send out the recap email. Like Emily said, it'll be a recap of the webinar. We'll have the recording, we'll have the slides, and we'll have a lot of these questions answered for you. So thank you so much for coming, and have a great rest of your day.
Everybody.